the chairperson of the chapter of SOGP. SOGP in the current scenario is really with its members now. We know that all the practitioners are having trouble in running their clinics, in running the services which are so essential for the patients. So keeping that in mind, we have not only talked generally about the skill, but we have had a separate part on how to take care of a patient of cesarean delivery when she is COVID suspect or COVID positive. So I would like to start with the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficial. Okay. I would like to convey regrets from Professor Razia Kurejo, who was supposed to be in the meeting today, but due to certain emergency in her own household, she had to be at her house today and she could not connect. She has conveyed her message of regret to all the members. We are running live. The comments and queries would be on the Facebook page of SOGP Secretariat. We will take your questions and we will put them to the worthy panelists. So over to you, Madam Rizwana, for the talk. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in.
Thank you, Haleema. Very kind of you, and I think it's a great honor for me to be talking of a procedure which is done so often in Pakistan. So to begin with, I'm just going to share a few slides, but I'm going to talk spontaneously on them. So cesarean section, as you all know, is the delivery of the baby through the abdominal route. By nature, it has to come out of the vaginal route, and there used to be a time when there was no cesarean section available. But then the mortality in those cases where the baby could not deliver was quite high. But otherwise, the rate of normal deliveries was also extremely high. But with passage of time, as cesarean section became safe, it is now becoming a dilemma. Okay, should you be doing cesarean section? There are many patients who even on demand want a cesarean section. So what should you do about them? The thing is this, that there's a huge debate which is always going on. The cesarean section rates are different in different countries and in different facilities of the same country as well. But I mean, this bahas comes to no end actually. So starting with, all right, so starting with the indications, basically definition I've already expressed, and then, all right, so the indications, there are certain absolute indications, because otherwise if you do not do a cesarean section on those indications, there may be death of the mother or of the fetus. So those consist of placenta previa, especially if it's central placenta previa, cord prolapse if the baby is alive, then vasa previa, transverse lie if she is in labor and the membranes are ruptured and there is no point in doing ECV, with hand prolapse, and abruptio placentae with an alive fetus. Otherwise, in abruptio placentae, if the fetus is dead, then the aim should be a normal vaginal delivery. So these are absolute indications which will result either in death of the mother or of the fetus. But there are large number of relative indications, and these relative indications make a major bulk of the cesarean sections which we do. So that is, one is fetal distress. And different people interpret CTGs, fetal heart rates in different conditions, and they label them as fetal distress, which may be meconium, which may be a category 3 CTG, etc. But this depends upon the person who's actually doing the monitoring during labor. And then failed progress. Failed progress is another dilemma also, due to which a large number of cesarean sections are done. The patient may be just in the initial phase of labor, but she is having contractions, mild contractions, the cervix is not dilated, and many people label this as failure to progress. So all this needs a big communication. Malpresentations, for instance, breech, you may offer an elective cesarean section, or you may assess and allow a normal vaginal delivery with discussion with the patients. But other malpresentations like brow presentation or shoulder presentation, etc., they may require a cesarean section. Then malpositions, they usually result in failed progress of labor, and certain malformations such as a hydrocaph or a major malformation due to which normal delivery may not be possible. CPD is the cephalopelvic disproportion. I mean, labeling a patient as a case of CPD is also not good, because the thing is this, that she may have a cephalopelvic disproportion in one pregnancy, and she may not have it in the other pregnancy, because this is called cephalopelvic disproportion. So it depends upon the size of the baby. And then you come on to previous scar. So after previous one scar, many people do not feel safe, although it is recommended that after discussion, you can give a trial of vaginal delivery. But after two scars, usually people do not, although there are various case reports on this as well. So the timing of delivery is very, very important. If it's an emergency, it's an emergency. That really doesn't matter whether what the gestational age is, if that is an emergency. But for elective cesarean sections, the recommended time is 39 weeks. And that also you should make sure from the first available scan that actually the dates are corresponding. So it can be done anytime after 38 weeks, but the recommended time is usually 39 weeks. You can delay it even further, but then there is a risk that instead of being an elective, it may become emergency if the patient comes in labor. And it is recommended that DEXA cover should be given in elective cases. So what are the types of incisions? So one is, obviously you all know that there is an abdominal incision and then there is a uterine incision. So there are various types of incisions which are present, and you can see this, that there was, initially it used to be a midline vertical incision, but nowadays the commonest incision is the fan steel incision, which is given about 2 centimeters above the pubic symphysis, and it's about 10 centimeters long. And then the Joel Cohen incision, this is also quite commonly done, especially in America. And this is an arbitrary line drawn between the two anterior iliac spines, and this is about 3 centimeters below that. And you can see it's just a straight line cut. And then the Maillard, which is quite high up, almost midway between the umbilicus and the pubic symphysis. And then obviously it's the midline incision. Paramedian is usually not given for cesarean sections. So these are abdominal incisions. And the other very important incision would be the uterine incision. So for the uterine incision, there is the commonest which is done is a transverse incision in the lower uterine segment. This is the commonest. But sometimes you may have to change it. So then it can be a lower uterine segment vertical incision. The transverse incision may be extended up. It can become a J-shaped incision, or it can also become a U-shaped incision if the J is present on both the sides of this. Then this is the next is the classical cesarean section, which you can see. And this is done in the upper segment of the uterus. This is usually done, I'm just going to come to that. And then this is the inverted T. So inverted T is usually done in cases of real dire emergencies when you cannot take the baby out and the baby obviously would be having distress or there's bleeding, etc. So you can extend this into an inverted T. But the inverted T, as well as the classical cesarean section, these are dangerous cesarean sections because they can lead to uterine rupture in the next pregnancy, even during pregnancy, and definitely during labor. So, but these have to be done sometimes. For instance, if there's a central placenta previa, especially an anterior placenta previa, then you should give an incision a little high up to prevent torrentic hemorrhage from the placental site. Sometimes it may be difficult to take out the baby, and especially if tubal ligation is to be done, then this classical cesarean section can be done. So another very important thing is that while you are giving this incision, there used to be a big debate between whether this should be done bluntly or it should be done with a scissor. But now the recommendation is that after giving a small incision in the uterus and the lower segment, you should do a blunt opening of the uterus in the lower segment, and your fingers should go like this. They should go a little up rather than going straight, because this can go directly into the parametrium. This can injure the uterine vessels, and there can be a lot of hemorrhage. So if you do it in a little upward manner on both sides, so this upward can be extended into a J, or it can be extended into a U if there is a problem. So then I'm supposed to tell you the steps of cesarean section. I think our main audience is gynecologists and they should know this, but I am just going to label them. That obviously first you give an incision in the skin, and this is a fan steel incision which is being given because that's the commonest which we do. Then after the skin, it's a fat layer, and you give an incision that, and then you can just separate it bluntly. Rectus sheath, you give an incision in the center, you hold it with the alices as it is being done in this photo, and then you cut the sheath, and in the center, it may be quite adherent to the muscle, so you may have to cut it. Otherwise, the rest of it, the rectus sheath is separated only from the muscles. The next comes the recti muscle. So that is, I think, extremely important, and as you can see, it should be up and down. Rather than doing it transversely like this, the plane is up and down, and you should just separate it, no cutting, nothing, you just separate it up and down. The main problem which occurs is that people try to pull it, and the inferior epigastric vessels, veins, arteries, they may be injured, and there can be a lot of subrectal hematoma, which is quite commonly seen in cesarean sections and causes a lot of debility to the patient. So this step is very, very important. Then comes the parietal peritoneum. You can open it with the finger bluntly, or you can give a nick in that. You must make sure that the bladder is empty, because the bladder, if it's high up and it's not empty, there is a kink in the catheter, or some people do not even put in a catheter, they just ask the patient to evacuate the bladder. But it's extremely important, because in this incision, you can directly cut the bladder. So after giving an incision in this, you can bluntly open it up, and then comes the visceral peritoneum. So visceral peritoneum, some people do not separate the visceral peritoneum, but I think it's important to separate it. And then you push the bladder down, and you can have an access to the uterine layer. Then you give a nick in the uterus, a small nick in the uterus, and as I already explained, that do a blunt dissection going a little upwards like this. After giving an incision, if there is another very important thing is that since you are giving an incision with a blade, if there is less liquor, or if there are ruptured membranes, there is no liquor, you may directly give the incision onto the baby's face or the head. So this is very, very important. If the liquor is enough, usually you see the membranes and you give a nick in that, and the fluid comes out. But if the membranes are absent, or there is very little liquor, then you must be very, very careful while you are incising the uterine layer. And then you put in your hand and you deliver the baby. After the delivery of the baby, it's the delivery of the placenta and the cord. Some people do a manual removal immediately, but it's always better that a syntocinon injection is given at that time. You do a controlled contraction and let it come by itself. But you must make sure that the uterus is empty. The worst thing is having retained products after a cesarean section. After a delivery, sometimes it may be acceptable, really. But after a cesarean section, to me, and I think to anybody who's doing cesarean sections, this should be unacceptable, that still there's some cotyledon or small part of placenta. So you must make sure that the cavity is empty. And then comes the suturing. So this is now done in the reverse order, but before suturing, what is important is that you must clear the peritoneal cavity completely. There should be no fluid, no blood present over there. You should make sure that all packs are counted, all instruments are counted, and then you should do the stitching, right? But that obviously should be the packs and the instruments you should make sure at the time of peritoneum. But over here, you have to thoroughly clean the peritoneal cavity, because if blood remains there, it can give rise to a lot of paralytic ileus, it can give rise to infection, and meconium stained liquor, if that's present, that can also produce a lot of problems. So you must clear that. So you don't need to wash the cavity always. You just clean it. And then suturing starts in the reverse order. The uterus has to be stitched. There's a lot of debate, a lot of papers present, and RCTs were done, but there was no difference found. But for long-term morbidity, I think it is important, even what is mentioned in the textbooks is also that it should be stitched in 2 layers. The first layer is hemostatic, the second layer embeds that, and it makes it a little strong. So the muscle layer is stitched in 2 layers. You must do a proper approximation, and then comes the peritoneum. So many people do not stitch the peritoneum. So I think, again, there are lots and lots of papers on this. It causes adhesions if you don't stitch, or it causes pain if you stitch, and the surgery time is a little longer. So I think this depends upon you. As far as I'm concerned, I always do a visceral as well as a parietal peritoneum stitching. And I have opened a lot of cases, which I have done previously, even previous 7 cesarean sections, and it was as neat as the first one. So according to my experience, I always do it. But what is recommended in the books is that if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. The results are the same. So then after this comes the rectus sheath, and this is the main support of the abdomen. And I think this is extremely important, what you do with the rectus sheath. This should be stitched with Vicryl. All the layers should be stitched with Vicryl. This should be also stitched with Vicryl, but if there are repeated surgeries, if the woman is very obese, etc., then it's important that you stitch this with Proline. And that will remain there. Vicryl obviously gets dissolved. So you stitch that. Now, regarding after the rectus sheath comes the fat. We are going in the reverse order now. So fat, it is recommended that if the fat is more than 2 centimeters, then you should stitch it. Otherwise, you can just leave it. But since you do subcuticular stitches, it's important that there should be no bleeding points in the fat. And the skin, for the skin, a large number of suturing is done. Staples are used, but the best recommended is Proline 20 in a subcuticular way. That gives the least pain, and least pain at removal as well, and it gives the best results. So then what are the complications? This is again very, very important, and it depends upon the surgeon and the anesthetist, and obviously the condition of the baby when you're doing, the condition of the mother while you're doing the cesarean section. So there are lots of complications of spinal anesthesia and others of general anesthesia. Because of many complications of general anesthesia, the recommended anesthesia is spinal and not general. So, however, in spinal anesthesia, spinal shock can occur. So the patient should be given Hartmann solution before the surgery begins. There can be a high spinal, which may require a G at the same time. Then it can be a failed spinal. As soon as you hold this patient's skin, the patient jumps. And then aspiration, that is very rare in spinal anesthesia, but sometimes when you give sedation, it may occur. Spinal headache post-operatively is quite common. Then you come on to the general anesthesia complications. The main complication of general anesthesia was aspiration pneumonia, which is called the Mendelssohn syndrome. And that is why the world reverted from general to spinal anesthesia, because that has less of problems. And then during surgery, what are the problems which can occur? These are obviously hemorrhage, which can sometimes be immense hemorrhage. Then there can be trauma to the surrounding structures, and amongst these surrounding structures, poor bladder is the most commonly injured. And then there can be difficult access if there are previous 1 or 2 or 3 cesareans which were badly done. Then there can be difficulty in delivering the baby. Sometimes the lower segment, even if the patient has not gone into labor, it may be quite thick, or in a preterm baby, or just holding the baby. So there can be difficulties in the delivery of the baby. Then extension of the uterine incision, especially if it goes laterally into the uterine vessels, can be torrential. Then obviously these are the complications which occur during surgery, right? And then there are complications which occur on the first day, which occur in the first week, and then those complications which occur later on. So usually on the first day, the main complication can be shock. And this can be due to loss of fluid, but you should always consider hemorrhage as the cause of shock. It can even be a cardiogenic shock. It can be a thyrotoxic shock. The patient may have been on steroids and she goes into shock. It can be an infective shock. It can be an anaphylactic shock. But if shock appears on the first day, you must consider hemorrhage. Then in the first week, there may be pain in the stitches, there may be hematoma formation, there may be dehiscence, there may be wound infection, there may be reduced urinary output if you're not taking appropriate fluids. Then paralytic ileus is quite common, so early mobilization and early breaking of nil per mouth should be encouraged. Then UTIs are also quite common, especially in countries like ours where people do not let their women take water, and already this area lies in the area of surgery and the patient has been catheterized, so these are quite common. Respiratory tract infections are more common with after general anesthesia. Then there can be a fistula formation, which can be a small cut given there and then, but there can be that the bladder has come in a stitch, and this may give way later on. I think these are extremely important steps, and one must learn cesarean section appropriately. Then in the second week, usually between the 7th and the 14th day, this is the most high-risk period for developing DVT. And sometimes DVT may not be there, but sudden pulmonary embolism can occur. Pregnancy is a hypercoagulable state, and with surgery, it can become really bad. So later in life, there may be pelvic congestion, there may be adhesions, there may be pain, chronic pelvic pain, which may be there, or there may sometimes be menorrhagia or irregular menstruation. There may be difficulty in conceiving if there were too many adhesions, etc. So the complications are divided into first day, first week, second week, and then late complications. And I think that is about it. So we should never take cesarean section lightly. It involves the life of the mother as well as the life of the fetus. And I think we should be very, very serious about training our postgraduates, training people, giving them proper indications to do a cesarean section, because the cesarean section rate is becoming really, really high in our country. And Robson criteria, where 10 points are taken into consideration, is extremely important. I think on the platform of SOGP, I would advise every unit to label the category of the cesarean section in the Robson criteria. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you very much, madam. I think it was a pleasure listening to you as always. Thank
Thank
you
you.
again, and thank you for bringing in the Robson's criteria thing. SOGP plans to have a separate
Yes,
webinar for Robson's
that I
criteria. We
think
will
is
do it.
very important.
I will
That's why I just touched it, Haleema, because
I
it
will definitely
requires a
invite
full
you on
time.
that,
Yeah,
along with Professor Lubna Hassan.
yeah.
It's she wanted to start it nationwide through SOGP. So thank you very much, madam, for such an elaborate presentation and comprehensive talk on the indications, complications, steps. Now may I request Madam Rehana Rahim with her team at Peshawar. Assalamu alaikum, welcome, to kindly show us the steps on the model. Thank you, madam. Kindly I can then start.
Dr. Haleema, can you listen?
Yes, very clearly, madam. Thank you. Please speak up. Yes.
So we are going to start with the steps which has been elaborated in detail by Professor Rizwana Chaudhry. But as we all agree, cesarean section is one of the commonly performed obstetrical procedures throughout the world, with incidence as high as 50% in most of the Scandinavian countries. And we all agree that so far there are no conclusive randomized trials for so many aspects and steps which are taken during cesarean section. So to start with, I would like to introduce my team. Dr. Hina Gul is my postgraduate trainee. We are in theater. Who's going to assist me? Dr. Mehraj is my anesthetist. Are you able to see all of us?
Yes, madam. Thank you for introducing us to your team.
And Sister Shahida is my scrub nurse. So I would like you first to have a look at the trolley. We have made two dummies because before it was not possible for us to go through the steps as elaborated by Professor Rizwana. Before going to the theater, we have done this checklist. WHO safety checklist has been introduced and many probably facilities throughout the country are doing it. This is the one which we have designed for Lady Reading Hospital. And the preoperative checklist would mean that we have identified our patient, we have put an identification band on, we have taken informed consent, we have explained the procedure to the patient along with complications, and we have clearly outlined the indication because there could be 2 or 3 indications sometimes. We have made sure that the patient, if she is going to theater in emergency, she has been given antacids and she has been given IV antibiotics. I'm going to talk about IV antibiotics a bit more in detail. She has had a pyodine vaginal wash, very, very relevant for patients who are in obstructed labor. And we have put in a wide bore IV cannula. We have started hydrating her. And we have informed the pediatrician, depending why we are going to do that cesarean section and if the baby needs resuscitation. And we have ordered blood products if indicated. So this is our pre-op checklist for emergency cesarean section. Intraoperative checklist we'll discuss when we are proceeding with the procedure. This is X. He has had acute
Please, your mic has got muted. Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so this is umbilicus, this is pubic symphysis, anterior superior iliac spines. Depending upon the urgency of cesarean section, we can either go for Joel Cohen incision or Fannin Steel, depending upon preferences. We have to make sure that the patient is scrubbed with pyodine or chlorhexidine. Both have been proven to be as effective in several clinical trials. The tilt, 20-degree tilt, which was recommended and has been still recommended, is not of proven value in different trials. So I'm going to give this pink is, can you see, can everyone see? This is the abdominal wall.
Yes, very clearly. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is anterior superior iliac spines. I'm going to go 3 centimeters below this. I'm going to go and give a straight incision. The length of incision varies, but it can vary up to 10 to 15 centimeters. Now you can clearly see the subcutaneous tissue, which is in blue color. I hope you people can see it. And I've given an incision right in the middle to separate the subcutaneous tissue. And then I'm going to expand it digitally with my fingers, as blunt extension has been recommended in many trials.
Focus on your
less
hands.
Tissue destruction and dissection. Now we can see glistening white rectus sheath. Can you all appreciate?
Yes, clearly seen, but ask the camera person to kindly focus on the lower pelvic part. Yes, now, yes, over here. Thank you. Use more Rizwana. Kindly unmute your
Doctor,
mic.
yes, unmute,
Kindly
please.
unmute your mic. Someone to unmute for madam, please. A PG to unmute for madam.
Okay.
Yes,
So
please.
this is the rectus sheath which has been cut in the middle 3 centimeters. And as Professor Rizwana said, we are going to pull it cephal head. Now we can see rectus muscles. Rectus muscles usually, well, here it is not. It shouldn't be like this. I'm just giving an incision. And they should be, as Dr. Rizwana said, it should be pulled cephal head. More cranially rather than caudally. So now the rectus muscles have been separated. This is the utrovesical fold of peritoneum. Now, about this bladder flap, many things and many studies are coming. Americans are not promoting this anymore. They said if probably you can give straight an incision higher up in the lower uterine segment without creating the bladder flap, it will reduce the febrile morbidity. But considering Pakistan and the amount of patients we get in obstructed labor, we are put in a Doyne's retractor now to pull down the tissues. I'm going to hold the visceral peritoneum and the utrovesical fold of peritoneum, and I'm going to separate it, and with blunt dissection, I'm going to push the bladder flap down. Can you all see?
Yes, it's
Can you all
visible.
see it? Yes.
We need slightly to focus. Please kindly ask the girl to focus if she can zoom in. Yes, thank you. But
So now
we need someone to show. We need someone to post some light on the surgical field with their telephone torch. If they can put telephone torch से अगर light डालेंगे तो हमें ज़्यादा अच्छा दिखेगा.
We are trying to do that.
Thank you, madam. We really appreciate your efforts.
Okay, now this is the uterus. We need to give an incision in the lower uterine segment. Again, we have to be careful so as to not to injure the fetal scalp or fetal lacerations, which is incidence is 2%. I've given an incision in the uterus. Again, a 3 centimeter. I can see the membranes bulging out, and I'm going to extend it digitally with my fingers caudally. This is the myometrium, the pink color. Can you see now? So the myometrium has been extended, and now we are straight away in the uterine cavity. Come to this another dummy now. So this is fetal head.
Very nice. We can see the baby delivering.
Yeah, we are going to introduce the hand now into the uterine cavity, stabilize the fetal head. If there is any difficulty in stabilization of fetal head and we think the head is free or floating, then we can literally use forceps and deliver the head. But here, in this case, I can easily get hold of the fetal head and try to deliver it as occipital anterior. That would be the aim, followed by fundal pressure, and the baby should deliver. Oh. And the baby should deliver without any difficulty. Now remember, this was a cesarean section being done for fetal distress. So we will apply clamps. We are not going to wait for delayed cord clamping. We'll apply clamps, cut the cord, take some cord blood for pH to make sure that the baby is not delivered acidotic, and hand over the baby to pediatrician. Now for placenta, we have to wait for spontaneous removal. Manual removal of placenta is not recommended because it would lead to more intraoperative blood loss. So we'll wait for spontaneous separation of placenta and cord traction, and the placenta would be delivered. Now my sister has informed me that she has started synthosanol infusion, about 10 to 20 units in 1 liter of crystalloids, and she is running that infusion. I will now take out my Doyne's retractor. I'll come back to the uterus. I've delivered the baby. Now I'm going to make sure that the field stays clear. So perhaps if there is a suction machine, please bring in the suction machine so that we can start with suction. We'll make sure that the field is absolutely clear. And now we have to start with resuturing. So I'm going to get hold of green Armitage. I'm going to hold the angles. Now, the debate of whether to close in single layer or double layer, as Dr. Rizwana said, is going on. So for women who do not desire further fertility, single layer closure is recommended. For women who want to have more kids, we would like to go with 2-layer closure. I'm using Vicryl, which is polyglycolic acid suture. It is absorbed with the delay, and angles are secured. And the first layer, let's suppose we have gone with the first layer now, and now we are going. So the purpose of closure of the first layer is to approximate the cut ends of myometrium, and the second layer would be so the second layer, which is the black tissue, which you can see here, would be the purpose of second layer would be to reapproximate or embed the myometrium. One thing we have to make sure that please do not involve endometrium in your sutures, because that is likely to result in higher incidence of placenta equita. So let's say we have closed the second layer. We have ensured hemostasis, and now we are looking forward to closure of either visceral peritoneum or parietal. So the recommendation is so far not to close visceral peritoneum and parietal peritoneum, but few studies which I came across are now recommending closure of parietal peritoneum. So we need to take out closure of parietal peritoneum, which is this, to prevent formation of adhesions between uterus and anterior abdominal wall. So up to the choice, but many favor, and the Royal College specially recommends not to close visceral and parietal peritoneum. So now we have closed the uterus, we have left the visceral and parietal peritoneum, and now we are coming, muscles are approximated themselves. We are not going to put any sutures in the muscles because that leads to considerable post-operative morbidity in terms of pain and increased analgesia demands. Now we are coming to rectus sheath. Again, rectus sheath would be stitched in continuous, non-locked sutures. And please, I omitted that in the closure of uterus as well. The sutures should not be locked, because locked sutures have been found to be associated with higher degree of uterine rupture. So now I'm closing the rectus sheath stepwise. I'll close all of it, interrupted sutures not far apart. A distance between two sutures should not be more than 1 centimeter, because this is the strength of abdominal wall. I've closed all this. So the rectus sheath is closed. We are now coming to the subcutaneous tissue. So as Dr. Rizwana said, if the depth of subcutaneous tissue is more than 2 centimeters, it is definitely recommended, it's a grade A recommendation, that the subcutaneous tissues should be closely approximated with a running suture. And again, there is a debate whether this space, if it is thick enough, more than 2 centimeters, whether you need to put in a drain or not. So the recommendations for putting in a drain and closing the subcutaneous tissue is strongly recommended, as it will result in lesser wound disruption and lesser seroma formation. So I've closed the subcutaneous tissue. I'm now coming to the skin. We have two choices, either staples or sutures. Staples are not recommended, are not favored as much now. And then subcuticular sutures would be closed by a continuous subcuticular layer, as this gives the best cosmetic results, and patients' satisfaction rate is also high with this. So I'll close the subcutaneous tissue with continuous, but the suture I'm using is Crowley. And then I will close in the both ends, put knots here, and the thread couldn't be pulled out about 5 to 7 days later. I'm going to put on a sterile dressing on the wound. It is ready. The dressing has been placed, and now my nurse is going to do the intraoperative checklist, which will include the points as: has the experience of surgeon taken into consideration? Was the patient's sterilization protocol followed? Was the surgeon's sterilization and gowning protocol followed? Was the swab and instrument count found correct? If indicated, was consultation sought from senior in time? And have you filled up an incident form if any untoward incident happened during surgery? Did you check out all the vitals post-operatively? And did you check out the patient levels of consciousness before shifting? Now remember, just for addition, this patient had a spinal anesthesia. Although it was a cesarean section for fetal distress, but the anesthetist wanted a spinal anesthesia. The choice is up to us, but we know general anesthesia for emergency patients would carry risk of aspiration pneumonia and Mandelson syndrome. So she had a spinal anesthesia, and the anesthetist made sure that she was pre-operatively loaded with IV crystalloid solutions, and the ephedrine was readily available in the theater. Now, to summarize, I'm going to give you evidence-based recommendations. Now, why I'm saying evidence-based recommendations? Because these are all grade A recommendations by the college. So the recommendations are that we must administer a single dose of antibiotic, and because this would cause a 60% decrease in infectious morbidity. Now, the choice of antibiotics recommendations are either it should be ampicillin or it should be a first generation cephalosporin. The second grade A recommendation is that uterine incision should be extended bluntly, cephalically, and not downward. We should await for spontaneous removal of placenta rather than manual removal. And if the lady does not desire any more fertility, the uterus can be closed in one layer. And if the length or the breadth of subcutaneous tissue is more than 2 centimeters, we need to put in a drain and we need to close that space. Now, prevention of PPH, very important. The grade A recommendation is we need to have an oxytocin infusion running while we are starting with the surgery, The doses can be adjusted, but the recommended, which I found out in many studies as well, we can start with 10 to 40 international units in 1 liter of ringer lactate. Dr. Rizwana, I know she'll be very happy if I mention transaminic acid. Studies have shown that giving of transamine before giving an incision would reduce intraoperative and post-operative blood loss by about 100 to 200 ml. I think I've covered most of the aspects. If anything is left, the discussion is open to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Rehana. It was a wonderful effort, I must say. And I'm really appreciating it sincerely, the dedication of your team, the model you created, and the way you wanted us all to see the steps. I understand a virtual meeting can never replace a face-to-face training session, but you have tried at most to use this opportunity of a virtual skill training session. Thank you very much. Coming to certain questions, if you allow me, or should I go for Dr. Shahida's presentation first and then take the questions as you advise, Dr. Shahida? And all the panelists, whatever is your suggestion. Kindly unmute your mic, Dr. Shahida.
I have no issues, whatever is feasible for you. I think if there's any pertinent question to the session so far.
There are 2 questions which I will ask. My first question is from Madam Rizwana. A question posed on Facebook is that, Madam, can you talk about clinical and CT pelvimetry? Certain members have written their query on that. So kindly show some light on the topic of pelvimetry in a patient of cesarean delivery, cesarean as well as clinical.
All right. This is, I think, a very, very important aspect. And basically, there are different recommendations for this. But clinical assessment is the best assessment. And as I always say, that in every pregnancy, there can be a CPD. There was no CPD in the last pregnancy, but this time the baby is very big, so it is disproportionate to the pelvis. So just measuring the pelvis by doing X-ray pelvimetry or by doing an MRI is not going to help. It has to be the size of the baby, the diameters of the head, and your clinical assessment whether the head is engaged or not. But you can do an X-ray pelvimetry, you can do an MRI pelvimetry, but again, the best assessment is this. So in that assessment, you have to see whether you are able to reach the sacral promontory or not, whether the head is engaged. If the head is engaged, CPD is ruled out. If the head is not engaged, then there can be CPD, there may not be any CPD. So in that pelvic vaginal examination, you need to see the sacral promontory, whether it's reachable with the 2 fingers or not. You need to see the distance between the ischial spines, and you need to see the curvature of the pelvis. But for instance, doing a cesarean section on a primary gravida just on the basis of this, that she has CPD, is not recommended.
Thank you, Madam. The next question is from Madam Rehana. And the question is that, if, God forbid, if we suspect a bladder injury, what are the signs for that? And how do we identify a bladder injury during a cesarean delivery? Madam Rehana.
Unmute, please. Unmute.
Madam, you need to unmute your mic. I'm sorry, we all are not used to it. Yes, please.
Can you listen? Okay. If you find out that the bladder has been injured, the signs usually at the time of surgery would be, you would be anticipating a bladder injury because the lady had previous 2 or 3 cesarean sections, or she probably has landed up in the labor room with obstructed labor. So these are the cases in which you are anticipating bladder injury. Make sure that you involve an experienced surgeon. Make sure there is a continuous bladder drainage. And while performing the cesarean section, the bladder flap has to be created following the principles of blunt dissection so that the bladder is pushed out of the way. Still, if you think the bladder has been injured, you will visually be seeing the hole sometimes which has been created. If it's big enough, you will be able to see sometimes even the catheter which has been in situ, and that would be seen by the operator or by the assistant. If the hole is small, sometimes there could be collection of urine in the utrovesical fold of peritoneum. And if you suspect that the bladder has been injured, simply inject methylene blue through Follis catheter and see whether it is coming out through your abdominal incision or not. If you think it is coming out, either repair it yourself if you're experienced enough, or get urology opinion. That should be enough in terms of anticipation, prevention, diagnosis. And once you have sutured the bladder in 2 layers or the defect has been closed, make sure that the catheter stays in for at least 2 to 3 weeks. And perhaps this would be the point where we will consider continuing with an IV antibiotics for a longer period of time.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive answer. I understand that it will definitely answer the query of the person who asked it. So now moving to our third presentation. If all of us now can mute our mics, and I request Madam Shahida Hussain Tarar to kindly talk about any special precautions in a situation when we suspect the patient to be a COVID suspect or a COVID positive patient. Over to you, Madam Shahida.
Thank you very much, Haleema. Thank you, SOGP Pakistan, for letting me in this esteemed panel. And my topic of my discussion is steps and precautions of cesarean section for a COVID patient. So I'll talk about that. Let me share my screen with you, and we can talk about certain measures and steps which we can take in order to give proper care to a patient who is undergoing cesarean section and she is COVID positive, and what precautions do we need to take to protect ourselves, to protect our assisting teams, and to protect the patient and their families with the complications of COVID pregnancy. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The topic is steps and precautions of cesarean section in COVID patients. First, I have to give a disclaimer that these recommendations are taken from recent publications, and as we all know that this is an ongoing situation and an ongoing pandemic, so these are subject to some changes from time to time. There is no conflict of interest, and the disease is evolving, and many recommendations may be reviewed later. And we have to consult the local hospital guidelines and available resources in the best interest of the patient and the healthcare providers. So with this, I'll start with some brief introduction about the disease. As we all know that this is a global pandemic which is caused by novel coronavirus, causing severe acute respiratory syndrome. And currently जो हमारा pregnant population के ऊपर जो इसका burden of disease है, वो ये है कि तकरीबन 100 million women या इससे ज़्यादा जो है worldwide इस वक्त pregnant हैं. And virtually all of them are likely or at a possible risk of contracting COVID disease. So इसका मतलब ये है कि 100 million से ज़्यादा औरतें जो कि pregnant हैं और वो COVID हो सकता है उनको, वो सब इन सारी जो हमें precautions जो हमें लेनी है, उन सब के ऊपर apply होंगी. Pregnant women, as we all know, they have a suppressed immune system. There is an alteration of the immune system, and they may be at an increased risk of some complications or severe or critical disease associated with COVID-19, especially pneumonia or respiratory failure. होने के chances उनमें थोड़े ज़्यादा हैं as compared to the normal population because of the virus does not appear to be increased in the setting of pregnancy or delivery, but the pregnant women who develop pneumonia due to infection with COVID-19 do appear to have an increased risk for obstetrical complications. These include preterm labor, premature rupture of membranes, preeclampsia, and the need for cesarean section, which otherwise might not have been indicated in their case. So these are all the maternal risks of COVID patients. in pregnancy. And similarly, the neonates are also at risk because a higher risk. In some studies, it has been seen that there is a higher incidence of stillbirth, neonatal deaths, and admission to the neonatal ICUs. So there is an increase in the neonatal risks as well. Worldwide, तकरीबन 145 million annual births होती हैं और वो सारी की सारी at risk हैं, including about 400,000 babies which are born daily. So daily अगर हम देखें तो तकरीबन 4 लाख बच्चे पैदा हो रहे हैं और वो सारे at risk हैं और इसी तरह से 145 million births जो कि हो रही हैं वर्ल्ड वाइड एनुअली वो सब at risk हैं. तो हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का SOGP का एम ये है कि हम ऐसी गाइडलाइंस डेवलप करें कि ऐसे पेशेंट्स को जो कि कोविड-19 हो सकते हैं उनको हम अप्रोप्रिएटली स्क्रीन कर सकते हैं या नहीं, या टेस्ट कर सकते हैं या नहीं बिफोर देयर एडमिशन टू लेबर एंड डिलीवरी suite और एट द टाइम ऑफ एडमिशन इन लेबर एंड डिलीवरी suites. To reduce the risk of maternal COVID-19 disease through minimizing hospital contact and appropriate isolation. दूसरा important चीज ये है कि पेशेंट्स का एक्सपोजर कम से कम करना है हमें, क्योंकि सारी प्रेग्नेंट औरतें अगर हर अपना छोटे प्रॉब्लम के लिए अगर वो हॉस्पिटल आएंगी तो देयर इज अ रिस्क कि वो हॉस्पिटल से वो इन्फेक्शन एक्वायर कर सकती. तो इसीलिए SOGP ने जैसे टेलीमेडिसिन का इतना अच्छा इनिशिएटिव लॉन्च किया कि टेलीमेडिसिन से एंटीनेटल पेशेंट्स को हेल्प प्रोवाइड की जा रही है एंड टू प्रोवाइड स्पेसिफिक गाइडेंस फॉर मैनेजमेंट ऑफ क्रिटिकली इल COVID-19 पॉजिटिव. तो ये बेसिक SOGP का एम है जिसके ऊपर हम सब मिल के काम कर रहे हैं कि हम अपनी कुछ ऐसी गाइडलाइंस डेवलप कर लें कि किस तरह से हम अपने पेशेंट्स को हेल्प प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं. अगर हम इंटरनेशनल वेबसाइट्स पे जाएं तो एज वी ऑल नो कि गाइडेंस जो है वो चेंज हो रही है रैपिडली, सो हमें अपडेट्स को देखते रहना है. और उनमें से एक वेबसाइट मैंने यहाँ पे कोट की है जो कि www.pregnancycovid19.com है. ये वेबसाइट जो है वो रैपिडली डेवलप कर रहे हैं और रैपिडली अपडेट कर रहे हैं. इंटरनेशनल वेबसाइट है जो कि सारी इंटरनेशनल गाइडलाइंस को, स्टडीज को देख के उसको वो अपडेट करते जा रहे हैं. दिस इज वन ऑफ द वेबसाइट्स. ऑब्वियसली WHO भी अपनी वेबसाइट को कॉन्स्टेंटली अपग्रेड कर रहा है. इसी तरह से सेंटर ऑफ डिजीज कंट्रोल जो USA का है वो भी कॉन्स्टेंटली अपडेट कर रहा है और रॉयल कॉलेज ऑफ गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट एंड ऑब्स्टेट्रिशियंस भी अपनी गाइडलाइंस को अपडेट करते जा रहे हैं. तो दिस इज वन एग्जांपल ऑफ अ वेबसाइट जिसको हम कंसल्ट कर सकते हैं अपने डे टू डे प्रॉब्लम्स के लिए. अब सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट ये है कि हमें सेफ्टी कौन सी लेनी है और कौन से प्रिकॉशंस लेने हैं. सिजेरियन सेक्शन की हम बात करें या इवन डिलीवरी की भी बात करें तो देयर आर 7 प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ सेफ्टी. 7 प्रिंसिपल्स ये हैं कि सेफ एंट्री होनी चाहिए डॉक्टर की या हेल्पिंग स्टाफ की जब उन्होंने कोविड पॉजिटिव पेशेंट्स को अटेंड करना है. तो उन्होंने अपना PPE जो है वो प्रॉपर मैनर में डॉन कर लेना है बिफोर दे एंटर द ऑपरेशन रूम. द मूवमेंट ऑफ द पेशेंट फ्रॉम वन एरिया टू अनदर. अगर पेशेंट लेबर रूम में है और वहां से हमने अगर सिजेरियन के लिए उसको शिफ्ट करना है तो उसकी सेफ ट्रांसपोर्ट होनी चाहिए. अगर पेशेंट लेबर रूम में है तो उसकी लेबर सेफ होनी चाहिए. बाय सेफ लेबर वी मीन कि अगर उसकी लेबर हम एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि स्मूथ और अनइवेंटफुल है तो हम उसको लेबर कंटिन्यू करें. और अगर उसका रिस्क सिजेरियन का ज्यादा है तो सिजेरियन सेक्शन का थ्रेशोल्ड इस सिनेरियो में अगर कोविड पॉजिटिव पेशेंट है तो हमें अपना सिजेरियन का थ्रेशोल्ड लो करना पड़ेगा. वो लो इसलिए करना है कि हमें क्रैश सिजेरियंस को अवॉइड करना है. क्रैश सिजेरियन का मतलब ये है कि सडन हमने डिसाइड किया और उसके बाद हम 5 मिनट के अंदर अंदर हम चाह रहे हैं कि हमारा एनेस्थेटिस्ट और हमारा ऑपरेशन थिएटर रेडी हो जाए और अवेलेबल हो जाए. तो हमें क्रैश सिजेरियन सेक्शंस अवॉइड करने पड़ेंगे बिकॉज उसमें प्रेपरेशन का टाइम नहीं मिलेगा हमारे एनेस्थेटिस्ट को, हमारे ऑपरेशन थिएटर स्टाफ को कि वो अपनी प्रोटेक्शन के लिए अपना सारा इंतजाम कर सकें. So it should be a safe labor. Otherwise, there has to be a reduced threshold for cesarean section ताकि हम सबको protect कर सकें. The surgery should be safe. By safe surgery we mean कि हम as far as possible कोशिश करें कि spinal anesthesia दें और intubation की need को minimize कर सकें. Because whenever there is intubation, there is generation of aerosols और aerosols की generation के साथ और general anesthesia के साथ risk of exposure to all the staff members in the operation theater वो मैनी फोल्ड ज्यादा हो जाता है। वी हैव टू लुक फॉर द सेफ्टी ऑफ द बेबी। सेफ्टी ऑफ द बेबी का ये मतलब है कि उसका डायरेक्ट कॉन्टैक्ट टू एनी पोटेंशियल कोविड पेशेंट, उसके अटेंडेंट्स हो या कुछ भी हो, उसको हमें उसको कॉन्टैक्ट को मिनिमाइज करना है। वी हैव टू कीप आवर स्टाफ सेफ एंड वी हैव टू कीप आवर स्टाफ सेफ एज वेल। अपने स्टाफ को भी, अपने सारे ऑपरेशन थिएटर के या अपने लेबर रूम के सारे इक्विपमेंट को और सारे अपने इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स को हमें सेफ रखना है और उनकी इन्फेक्शन प्रिवेंशन के लिए हमें सारे अपने मेथड जो हैं वो फॉलो करने हैं। सो दीज आर द 7 प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ सेफ्टी विच वी हैव टू लुक फॉर। जनरल प्रिंसिपल्स क्या हो सकते हैं कि अगर पॉसिबल हो तो सारे पेशेंट्स को जो कि लेबर रूम में आके जिन्होंने एडमिट होना है ऑपरेशन के लिए या डिलीवरी के लिए, उनकी अप्रोप्रिएट स्क्रीनिंग, टेस्टिंग और प्रेपरेशन की जा सके। स्क्रीनिंग ऑफ पेशेंट्स कमिंग टू लेबर एंड डिलीवरी ट्रियाज। ट्रियाज में जब वो आए तो वहीं पे उनकी स्क्रीनिंग हो जाए। एंड स्क्रीनिंग आई एम श्योर कि हम सब अब बार बार हम देख चुके हैं कि स्क्रीनिंग हमें कैसे करनी है। हमें उनके कुछ क्वेश्चंस हैं जिसमें फीवर, शॉर्टनेस ऑफ ब्रेथ, कॉफ, हिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्रैवल, हिस्ट्री ऑफ कॉन्टैक्ट विद एनी कोविड पॉजिटिव पेशेंट। इन सब मेथड्स के साथ, इन सब चीजों के साथ हम स्क्रीनिंग करते हैं। उसके अलावा हमें अपने थोड़े से बिहेवियर्स में और अपने कल्चर में भी मॉडिफिकेशंस करनी है, जो कि हम सब ऑलरेडी कर चुके हैं, कि रूटीन का लेबर रूम और डिलीवरी का वर्कलोड है उसको कम करना है। टेलीमेडिसिन इसमें बहुत ज्यादा हमें हेल्प कर रही है कि हम पेशेंट्स को उनके माइनर सिम्टम्स के लिए और माइनर प्रॉब्लम्स के लिए वी कैन ऑलवेज डिस्कस देयर प्रॉब्लम्स ऑन द टेलीफोन, जिसमें कि टेलीफोन भी है, स्काइप भी है, वीडियो कॉल्स भी हैं, जिससे कि हम उन विजिट्स को मिनिमाइज कर सकते हैं। इसके अलावा विजिटर्स पॉलिसी, जिससे हम सारे लोग आजकल प्रॉब्लम्स में हैं कि एक पेशेंट के साथ 10-12 अटेंडेंट्स जो आ जाते हैं। वी हैव टू मेक अ पॉलिसी ऑफ ऑल आवर हॉस्पिटल्स दैट वन पेशेंट मस्ट बी अकम्पनीड बाय ओनली वन sensible attendant, only one attendant who can make decisions, who can arrange for things if needed, और विजिटर्स को मिनिमाइज करना है। और सिमिलरली कोविड पेशेंट्स को हमने एडमिट कहाँ पे करना है और उनको हमने कहाँ पे आइसोलेट करना है। वो बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है कि हम अपने सारे लेबर रूम्स में एक ऐसा एरिया आइडेंटिफाई कर दें जिसमें कि अगर पेशेंट कोविड पॉजिटिव है या सस्पेक्टेड कोविड पेशेंट है तो वो एक जगह पे हो, वो लेबर रूम में, जनरल वार्ड में बाकी पेशेंट्स के साथ मिंगल ना हो रही हो। तो दीज आर द स्टेप्स ऑफ सेफ्टी, जिससे कि हम प्रिवेंट कर सकते हैं कि हम किस तरह से इसके एक्सपोजर को, दूसरे पेशेंट्स के एक्सपोजर को और अपने अटेंडेंट्स के एक्सपोजर को मिनिमाइज कर सकते हैं। Then coming to the cesarean section, COVID alone is not an indication for cesarean section. The mode of delivery should be dictated by obstetrical indications. There has been no documented vertical transmission as of date. सिर्फ 1 या 2 anecdotal cases हैं जिसमें के vertical transmission हुई. Otherwise, majority of the babies born to COVID positive mothers are negative. और लास्ट बट नॉट द लीस्ट कि हमें क्रैश सिजेरियंस को अवॉइड करना है। क्रैश सिजेरियन जैसे मैंने कहा कि जिसमें इमीडिएट डिलीवरी हम चाह रहे हैं उसको अवॉइड करना है, क्योंकि उसमें रिस्क ज्यादा हो जाएगा। तो इसलिए थ्रेशोल्ड फॉर सिजेरियन सेक्शन थोड़ा सा हमें नीचे लेके आना पड़ेगा। What are the precautions which we can use? Designate when possible one operation room for the use of suspected or confirmed COVID-19 patients. मैं अगर अजीज भट्टी शहीद हॉस्पिटल जहाँ पे मैं काम करती हूँ मैं वहाँ की बात करूँ तो since the very beginning of this pandemic we had marked one operation theater and the adjoining ward for the operations and post-op recovery of COVID positive patients, even suspected patients. हमने अपना एक ऑपरेशन थिएटर जो है उसको डेजिग्नेट कर दिया था एज कोविड पॉजिटिव ऑपरेशन थिएटर एंड सो फार वी हैव डिलीवर्ड 14 पेशेंट्स विद confirmed COVID-19 disease, and alhamdulillah the outcome has been very good so far. A designated PPE monitor should be assigned. हम अपनी किसी एक सीनियर स्टाफ नर्स को या किसी एक स्टाफ मेंबर को हम डेजिग्नेट कर दें कि उसने PPE इंश्योर करना है कि प्रॉपर डॉनिंग और प्रॉपर डॉफिंग हो सके, क्योंकि PPE तभी काम कर सकेगा अगर वो उसको प्रॉपरली पहनेंगे और उसको प्रॉपरली उतारेंगे, अदरवाइज PPE जो उसकी प्रोटेक्टिव वैल्यू है वो खत्म हो जाएगी। एंड देयर हैज टू बी अप्रोप्रिएट प्लानिंग इंक्लूडिंग सिमुलेशन ट्रेनिंग, जिसको कि हमें बार बार अपनी ड्रिल्स के साथ, एक्सरसाइजेस के साथ हमें बार बार करते रहना है कि पीपीई को कैसे पहनना है और पीपीई को कैसे उतारना है। जैसे पूरी दुनिया में इस पे काम हो रहा है कि उन्होंने एक्सपोजर को प्रिवेंट करने के लिए बहुत सारे मेजर्स लोकली कोई ना कोई मेजर्स अडैप्ट किए। ये इस डायग्राम में, इस पिक्चर में एक मेजर हमें नजर आ रहा है कि प्लास्टिक शीट है जिसको सिंपल फ्लेक्सिबल रॉड के साथ उन्होंने हैंग कर दिया है और वो पेशेंट को उसने कवर किया हुआ है और एनेस्थेटिस्ट के वो आर्म्स तक वो शीट आ रही है और उसके बाद एनेस्थेटिस्ट का फेस जो है वो भी प्रोटेक्ट हुआ हुआ है एंड पेशेंट हरसेल्फ इज बीइंग प्रोटेक्टेड। तो दीज आर सिंपल मेजर्स और जो हम अपने लोकली रिसोर्सेज के साथ, लोकल रिसोर्सेज के साथ हम ये मेजर्स ले सकते हैं। यू कैन सी इन दिस पिक्चर एज वेल दैट द पेशेंट, this COVID positive patient is being ventilated, but the anesthetist is markedly protected by the use of this simple plastic sheet, which is hanged by a flexible rod. Aerosolization का risk जनरल एनेस्थीसिया में ज्यादा हो जाता है। इसके अलावा कुछ और ऐसे प्रोसीजर्स हो सकते हैं जिसमें एरोसोलाइजेशन हो सकती है, तो उन सारे प्रोसीजर्स में हमें फिर अपनी रेस्पिरेटरी प्रोटेक्शन जो है वो और ज्यादा जरूरी हो जाती है। नाउ कमिंग टू द डॉनिंग एंड डॉफिंग, सिंपल हैंड वॉश या उसके हैंड सैनिटाइजर के बाद डॉनिंग शुरू करेंगे और डॉनिंग में पहले गाउन, डिस्पोजेबल गाउन, फिर मास्क, फिर गॉगल्स और फाइनली ग्लव्स। और सिमिलरली डॉफिंग में क्या करेंगे कि सबसे पहले ग्लव्स उतारेंगे, फिर गाउन उतारेंगे, फिर गॉगल्स उतारेंगे, फिर मास्क उतारेंगे और उसके बाद हैंड वॉशिंग या हैंड सैनिटाइजर यूज कर लेंगे। सो दीज आर द सिंपल स्टेप्स ऑफ डॉनिंग एंड डॉफिंग। पीपी हमें सिजेरियन सेक्शन के लिए कौन सी पीपीई रिकमेंडेड है ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ जो अब तक का एविडेंस और अब तक का जो डाटा और गाइडलाइंस जो है वो हमें क्या कहती हैं कि सिजेरियन सेक्शन में हमें एक गाउन जो कि डिस्पोजेबल हो सकता है या रीयूजेबल स्टेराइल क्लॉथ गाउन हो सकता है विद डिस्पोजेबल प्लास्टिक मैकिंटॉश अंडरनीथ, स्टेराइल ग्लव्स, डबल ग्लव्स करें सर्जन के लिए अगर वो कोविड-19 पेशेंट को डील कर रहा है, सर्जिकल मास्क विच इट शुड बी कवरिंग द N95 मास्क। सर्जिकल मास्क इसलिए कि वो सॉइलिंग को प्रोटेक्ट करेगा और उसको हम रीयूज कर सकते हैं। N95 ज्यादा देर तक हम यूज कर सकेंगे अगर हमने उसके ऊपर सर्जिकल मास्क पहन लिया है, बिकॉज उससे डायरेक्ट स्प्लैश ऑफ फ्लूइड या ब्लड जो है वो सर्जिकल मास्क के ऊपर आ जाएगा और N95 मास्क जो है हमारा वो सेफ रहेगा। Then we have to use goggles or face shield depending on the availability, या goggles या face shield। उसके अलावा कैप, शू कवर्स, waterproof shoes और boots। So the level of PPE required should be based on the risk of requiring a general anesthetic। अगर पेशेंट को GA देने की जरूरत पड़े तो PPE का लेवल बढ़ाना पड़ेगा, एनहांस करना पड़ेगा। अगर पेशेंट स्पाइनल एनेस्थीसिया के साथ उसको ऑपरेट कर रहे हैं तो दिस PPE इज मोर देन सफिशिएंट। अगर जनरल एनेस्थीसिया है तो फिर हमें अपना लेवल ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन बढ़ाना पड़ेगा। Now, what other precautions we can use for emergency cesarean sections? Ideally, emergency cesarean delivery वहीं पे हो जानी चाहिए जहाँ पे कि पेशेंट ऑलरेडी मौजूद है। अगर लेबर रूम के अंदर एडजॉइनिंग ऑपरेशन थिएटर मौजूद है तो दैट इज द बेस्ट सोल्यूशन। ऑपरेशन थिएटर प्लस द नियोनेटल रिससिटेशन इक्विपमेंट। एक हैमरेज किट जिसमें सिंटोसोनॉन, ट्रांसैमिक एसिड और मीजोप्रोस्टॉल हमारे पास हर वक्त हर पेशेंट के साथ एक हैमरेज किट मौजूद होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज वी डू नॉट वांट टू हैव एनी पीपीएच इन आवर हैंड इन अ कोविड पॉजिटिव पेशेंट, क्योंकि जब भी कोई इमरजेंसी होगी कोविड पेशेंट की तो प्रोटेक्शन हमारी कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर जाएगी। द यूज ऑफ टर्ब्यूटेलिन शुड बी रिव्यूड। टर्ब्यूटेलिन अगर हम सेक्शन डिले करना चाह रहे हैं और हम टर्ब्यूटेलिन दे रहे हैं तो उसको रिव्यू करें क्रिटिकल केयर टीम के लिए, इसलिए कि टर्ब्यूटेलिन टैकीकार्डिया करेगी और हम कोविड पॉजिटिव पेशेंट की बात कर रहे हैं जो ऑलरेडी कार्डियो रेस्पिरेटरी कॉम्प्रोमाइज में है, तो इसलिए इसको हमें रिव्यू नहीं करना, रिव्यू करना है और टर्ब्यूटेलिन को यूज नहीं करना। An effective method of communication for the anesthesia team, neonatology team and obstetric team should be implemented. कम्युनिकेशन सबसे मुश्किल होती है जब मास्क हम सब ने पहने हुए होते हैं, तो वी हैव टू स्पीक लाउडर एंड कम्युनिकेशन इज अ बिट डिफिकल्ट, इसलिए कम्युनिकेशन का मेथड हमें अपना एस्टैब्लिश कर लेना चाहिए। If an emergent delivery is planned, this should be performed at the bedside in the ICU to avoid transferring the patient to the operation theatre। ये अब ICU की बात है। अगर critically ill patient है और उसकी अगर इमरजेंसी डिलीवरी या सिजेरियन सेक्शन प्लान कर रहे हैं तो वो वहीं पे बेड साइड पे हो जाना चाहिए। Choice of anesthesia depends on the oxygen saturation of the patient. अगर oxygen saturation 93 से ज़्यादा है तो anesthesia should be a regional anesthesia. अगर oxygen saturation 93 से कम है तो हमें patient will need general anesthesia, और general anesthesia में फिर rapid sequence induction और tracheal intubation with a cuff tube वो perform करते हैं. So choice of anesthesia would depend on the oxygen saturation of the patient. और ये once again anesthesia box है, intubation box है, जिसमें कि उन्होंने एक फ्लेक्सी ग्लास का एक बॉक्स बना के और उसमें उसके अंदर इंट्यूबेशन, उस बॉक्स के अंदर इंट्यूबेशन की जा रही है. once again this would prevent the spread of aerosols into the environment and it would protect the operation theater staff. So oxygen saturation अगर adequate है तो regional anesthesia with epidural top up or single shot subarachnoid blockade needs to be actively considered instead of general anesthesia. ये कुछ सीक्वेंस है जिसमें कि एक्यूटली इल पेशेंट, अगर कोविड पेशेंट है, प्रेग्नेंट है और एक्यूटली इल है तो उसको हमने कैसे मैनेज करना है. अगर लेबर में है और उसकी ऑक्सीजन सैचुरेशन नॉर्मल है और कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं है तो उसको हम वेजाइनल डिलीवरी के लिए ले जा सकते हैं. अगर पेशेंट का मैटरनल या फीटल कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज है तो इमरजेंसी सिजेरियन डिलीवरी करनी है. अगर ऑक्सीजन सैचुरेशन मोर देन 93 है तो हम रीजनल एनेस्थीसिया देंगे और अगर लेस देन 93 है तो उसको जीए देंगे. बट अगर ऑक्सीजन सैचुरेशन उसकी मोर देन 93 है और वो हाइपोटेंसिव है या हाइपरटेंसिव है तो फिर उसको हमें इवैल्यूएट करना है. अगर पेशेंट हाइपरटेंसिव है तो प्री इक्लेम्पसिया के प्रोटोकॉल्स के साथ उसको इवैल्यूएट करना है, और अगर हाइपोटेंसिव है, पेशेंट का ब्लड प्रेशर ड्रॉप कर रहा है, तो वी हैव टू मेक श्योर कि हम ये देख लें कि वो कार्डियोजेनिक शॉक में है या कि सेप्टिसेमिक शॉक में है. उसके अकॉर्डिंगली उसकी मैनेजमेंट होगी. So when should we deliver a critically ill COVID patient? Ideally 34 weeks के बाद डिलीवरी करनी चाहिए critically ill patients की भी, लेकिन अगर पेशेंट का कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज है, उसके रेस्पिरेटरी स्टेटस का कॉम्प्रोमाइज है, तो वी हैव टू प्लान अ डिलीवरी बिफोर 34 weeks because delivery can help to optimize the maternal respiratory status. So if the patient is compromised in her respiratory system, we have to do an emergency cesarean section at any time when the patient presents to us. But if the respiratory system is stable and patient is managing well on supportive treatment, then we can plan a delivery after 34 weeks. अगर पेशेंट कोलैप्स हो जाए या उसका CPR करना पड़े तो हमें क्या करना है? प्लीज रिमेंबर कि इस सिनेरियो में, कोविड के सिनेरियो में कोई ऐसी इमरजेंसी नहीं है जिसको हम अटेंड करें PPE के बगैर. ऑलवेज प्रोटेक्ट योरसेल्फ फर्स्ट एंड देन प्रोसीड फॉर द प्रोटेक्शन और resuscitation of the patient. The resuscitation team should don full PPE. 5 मिनट टाइम ज्यादा लग जाएगा, लेकिन हम उस कोशिश करें कि PPE के बगैर CPR ना करें. डॉक्टर हलीमा वुड वाउच फॉर दैट कि 2 जो क्रिटिकली सिक पेशेंट्स आए और इसी तरह से कोयटा में कुछ पेशेंट्स आए जो कि क्रिटिकली सिक थे और लेबर रूम में डायरेक्ट लैंड किए इन अ स्टेट ऑफ शॉक, और उनका हमारी एनर्जेटिक रेजिडेंट्स ने वहीं पे CPR किया विदाउट डॉनिंग फुल PPE. एंड unfortunately few of our residents in Quetta and in Karachi as well, they got infected while doing CPR of those critically ill patients. So please remember कि first responders जिन्होंने CPR करना है या maternal collapse को manage करना है, उन्होंने अपना PPE जरूर पहनना है, उसके बगैर CPR नहीं करना. Transferring these patients to the post anesthesia care unit might compromise and cross-contaminate other post-operative patients. तो ट्रांसफर करते वक्त हमें याद रखना है कि हम ट्रांसफर करते वक्त पेशेंट या उसके टेनेंट्स को या अपने हॉस्पिटल की टीम को कॉम्प्रोमाइज ना कर दें. सो प्रोविजंस मस्ट बी मेड कि हम ऑपरेशन थिएटर के बिल्कुल साथ किसी एडजॉइनिंग एरिया में उनको पोस्ट ऑप केयर के लिए वहाँ पे उनको रखें जब तक पेशेंट स्टेबल नहीं हो जाता पोस्ट ऑपरेटिव पीरियड में, और उसके बाद डायरेक्ट उनको आइसोलेशन वार्ड में या आईसीयू में जहाँ पे भी उनका स्टे रिकमेंडेड है वहाँ पे हम उनको शिफ्ट करें। सो पोस्ट ऑप केयर में प्लीज रिमेंबर कि उनको जनरल वार्ड में नहीं रखना और उनको बहुत ज्यादा ट्रांसफर हॉस्पिटल में कई जगहों पे नहीं करना टू अवॉइड एक्सपोजर टू द डिफरेंट अदर पेशेंट्स। नाउ वी कम टू द नियोनेटल केयर। नियोनेटल स्टाफ को भी डेजिग्नेट करें और वो भी फुल पीपी पहन के लेबर रूम में या ऑपरेशन थिएटर में आए। रिससिटेशन एक सेपरेट एरिया में हो जो कि डेजिग्नेटेड हो। इसी तरह से नियोनेट में भी एरोसोल जनरेटिंग प्रोसीजर्स जो हैं वो इंट्यूबेशन है या सर्फेक्टेंट की एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हो सकती है या सक्शन हो सकती है विद सीपैप। तो ये सारे एरोसोल जनरेटिंग प्रोसीजर्स हैं जिसमें के रिस्क ज्यादा हो जाएगा। वी हैव टू नर्स बेबीज विद रेस्पिरेटरी डिस्ट्रेस इन द इंक्यूबेटर्स। उनका सिंगल स्वैब टेस्ट पीसीआर का उन बेबीज का विद इन 12 to 24 आवर्स आफ्टर बर्थ वी हैव टू टेक अ सिंगल स्वैब। उससे पहले नहीं लेना, 12 घंटे या 24 घंटे के बाद लेना है, क्योंकि अर्लियर हम लेंगे तो मैटरनल इन्फेक्शन पिक कर लेगा और वो न्यूनेटल इन्फेक्शन पिक नहीं करेगा, बट इट वुड पिक द मैटरनल इन्फेक्शन। अगर 2 टेस्ट उसके नेगेटिव आ गए 24 आवर्स अपार्ट तो हम उसको क्लियरेंस दे सकते हैं कि दैट बेबी इज कोविड नेगेटिव। अगर क्लिनिकली इंडिकेटेड नहीं तो उसको नर्सरी में एडमिट नहीं करना और उसकी क्लिनिकल असेसमेंट यूजुअल प्रोटोकॉल्स के साथ ही होनी है और नियोनेटल सर्वेलेंस और फॉलोअप और वैक्सीनेशन उसी तरह से होनी है जैसे कि एक नॉन कोविड बेबी की होती है। ये थाईलैंड का जो शुरू में रिपोर्ट हुआ जो कि 1 मंथ का बेबी था जो कि रिकवर हो गया, जो कि एट बर्थ कोविड पॉजिटिव था और उसके बाद आफ्टर 1 month he cleared of all the COVID infection and he is fine now. Last but not the least, breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, WHO की recommendation ये है कि COVID positive mothers can breastfeed their babies and they must breastfeed their babies. उसके लिए कुछ instructions हमें mother को देनी है। वो instructions ये हैं कि the mother should be advised about hand washing before touching the baby or before touching the breast pump or bottle. She has to avoid coughing or sneezing on the baby while feeding. Wear a face mask while feeding or caring for the baby. When coughing or sneezing, use a tissue paper and do not sneeze into the elbow. हम जनरल पब्लिक को ये कहते हैं कि अगर स्नीज करना है तो अपनी एल्बो में कर लें, लेकिन नर्सिंग मदर अपनी एल्बो में स्नीज नहीं करेगी बिकॉज शी माइट इन्फेक्ट द बेबी, अगर उसके क्लोथ्स जो है वो इन्फेक्टेड हो जाएंगे। Ask someone who is well to feed the baby to help in feeding the baby. Strict adherence to sterilization for bottle feeding with formula or express milk, bottle feed sterilization. If the mothers are expressing breast milk in the hospital, a dedicated breast pump should be used. वो उस mother के लिए dedicated होना चाहिए and must follow recommendations for pump cleaning after each use. अगर breast pump use कर रहे हैं तो हर दफा use के बाद उसको properly clean करना है और मदर की कंडीशन को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए ऑब्जर्व करें एंड मदर कैन कंटिन्यू। दिस इज द WHO गाइडलाइन के ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग मदर्स एंड विद COVID-19 कैन फीड देयर बेबीज। ये WHO की रिकमेंडेशन है और वो इन्फेंट्स को जो डायरियल डिजीजेज और वेरियस इन्फेक्शियस डिजीजेज जो कि नियोनेटल मोर्टेलिटी को बढ़ा रही हैं उससे प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए मदर्स मिल्क और ब्रेस्ट मिल्क इज द मोस्ट इफेक्टिव मेजर और वो इम्यून सिस्टम को, उस बेबी के इम्यून सिस्टम को एनहांस करता है। मैसेज टू टेक होम इज कि सेफ्टी इज नॉट एक्सपेंसिव, रादर इट इज अ प्राइसलेस थिंग। तो ये हम सबको याद रखना बड़ा जरूरी है कि सेफ्टी ड्यूरिंग सिजेरियंस एंड ड्यूरिंग लेबर एंड डिलीवरी वी हैव टू मेक श्योर कि हम सब सेफ रहें, हम खुद सेफ रहें और हमारी टीम सेफ रहे। सो इट इज नॉट एन एक्सपेंसिव थिंग, रादर इट इज अ प्राइसलेस थिंग। दिस इज ऑल फ्रॉम माय साइड। We can discuss any questions or queries if you think anything else needs to be shared, or I can show you a simple small video as well if there is time.
Yes, please, Dr. Shahida, do. डॉक्टर शाहिदा काइंडली वीडियो में अगर आवाज है तो उसको बढ़ाइएगा. Dr. Shahida, if there is a voiceover with this video, can you please enhance the, because we are unable to hear anything along with this video.
Sorry?
We are unable to hear if there is a voiceover in this video.
Okay, all right. There is a voiceover, but I don't know whether it is working or not. But this was an interesting video that I wanted to share.
Please do. If it does not work, then you can just reset the background that what are they doing for better understanding. Thank you.
Can you hear now? Presents extra challenges. These include considering methods. Can you?
हैंड्स फ्री लगे हुए वो सेम सुनाई दे रहा था, सुनाई दे रहा है. आप हैंड्स फ्री हटा दीजिए ताकि हमें भी सुनाई दे.
Donning of PPE.
Can you hear
Grab
now?
bags to get the right treatment started early. Communication issues due to masks and visors, which may be helped through the use of treatment algorithms, and acknowledging that this may be a stressful time for the woman and helping alleviate her fears. And also planning the logistics of transfers. Here, a woman with suspected COVID-19 has just given birth, and the midwife discovers that a significant postpartum hemorrhage has occurred. The midwife ensures that mother and baby is safe and needs to call for help. Getting the right help in a timely fashion needs to be done in the context of infection control. Emergency buzzers, 222 calls, phone calls, walkie-talkies and intercoms have all been successfully used, but all have their pros and cons. So see what works on your unit, refine the system through testing, and then train your teams in its use. In this situation, the midwife pulls the emergency buzzer. The team responding have been trained and know not to enter the room without PPE. The first responder ascertains the nature of the emergency, in this case, postpartum hemorrhage, and she confirms this with closed-loop communication. She can now explain the nature of the emergency to the incoming team. This allows the team to don the appropriate PPE for this emergency. It also allows the team to know which member should be prioritised to don PPE and enter the room first. The priority team member depends on the emergency. As this is an obstetric emergency, the most senior obstetrician has assumed leadership. She allocates tasks to the rest of the team, including retrieval of emergency equipment and the donning priority. Having someone designated to help the rest of the team don PPE first means the senior responders can start definitive management more quickly. Simulations done in Leeds University hospitals have reduced response times by 1 to 2 minutes by doing this. Single-use emergency grab bags can overcome the issues of wasting emergency equipment, as would happen if emergency boxes or emergency trolleys were brought into a room contaminated with coronavirus. The grab bags should contain the leanest equipment needed, plus a treatment algorithm, and be replaced after each use. PPE makes communication challenging. Teams should concentrate on being clear and succinct. SBAR handover is an effective way of doing this. Closed-loop communication allows team members to know that instructions have been heard and understood, thereby closing the communication loop. Treatment algorithms are powerful tools to ensure prompt treatment, clear communication, and improved situational awareness. Even a junior team member can work through the algorithm, ensuring the team completes all the management steps. Meows charts can also help the team track the woman's severity of illness and her response to their treatment. Obstetric emergencies can be daunting for the woman and her partner. This can be exacerbated by teams wearing PPE. Keeping calm and keeping the woman and her partner informed can help alleviate this. Transfers, such as to theatre, are more complex owing to infection control considerations. Units should carefully consider the logistics so that when a transfer is needed, the woman and all the necessary teams and equipment can converge on the destination smoothly. Use multi-professional walkthroughs and simulations to refine and test the system, and then train your staff in its use. Correct doffing is vital for infection control. At the end of a patient episode, before leaving the room, theatre, doff gloves, gown, apron and visor. For performing hand hygiene, and then exiting to doff the face mask, before washing your hands with soap and water. For easily digestible, up-to-date information on managing confirmed or suspected COVID-19 women, visit our website or email us for our latest COVID-19 newsletter.
Thank you, Dr. Shahida. And we really not only appreciate the dedicated efforts of my panel of experts, but also the resources which we have used for this webinar today. All the professional organizations, RCOG, ACOG, WHO, SAFOG, AOFOG, so many professional organizations, Center for Disease Control, they have all worked together. The whole medical fraternity has brought in, they have joined hands, and only joint efforts can face these challenges. Otherwise, single-handedly, no one can fight with this situation. Thank you very much again. Few comments for you, Dr. Shahida. Most of them have acknowledged and they have said, well done, well presented. But just few things, they were, a few of the audience wanted that if you can just share through SOGP members group, the forms, the triage forms of assessing the disease severity in such patients. And if you can show them if they are on your desktop right now, otherwise we can share them later with them. If possible.
I'll share in the Facebook page of SOGP. I'll share the form on the SOGP Facebook page, the triage form, the questions, verbal questions, and the WHO form for documentation of all the details of a COVID positive mother. I'll share both of them on the SOGP Facebook page.
Thank you very much. And I think later on we will request our technical partners to provide a link for a recorded session for those who could not attend, because Madam Rizwana's, few of the trainees have written that they wanted to hear it again, and it was already done. So we have reassured them that we will definitely share with Madam's permission, if she allows, the recording of the session. And if Dr. Rehana Rahim allows, only then. If the panelists allow, can we put it for recorded session so that the overall, whenever they feel feasible, we should use this technology for the learning of our new trainees, especially who are preparing for exams in this challenging situation. Only if you allow us.
I allow you.
Thank you, thank you. Madam Rehana, if you raise your hand, give me your approval to hear a recorded session.
Perfect approval, Dr. Haleema, you can share it.
Thank you very much. I again congratulate. I again feel it as a responsibility of SOGP office to really present my sincerest thanks to my panel of experts, to SAMI Pharmaceutical, to SOGP office secretariat staff, and to our president, Professor Razia Kurejo, for giving me a go-ahead to do these activities on SOGP forum. Thank you very much to all the audience for taking out time for attending this session so actively. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Conclude, madam, from your side, Dr. Shahida, Dr. Hana, any please concluding comments are more than welcome. Otherwise, we can finish.
I would like to thank SOGP.
Nice for participation. And we hope we will sincerely continue with these efforts to improve the standard of care for women and their health in Pakistan. Inshallah.
Thank you. I must congratulate our SOGP office for really thinking over these ideas and helping me to create a new webinar every 2-3 weeks. And thank you for all the members of local chapter, the academic board, my executive committee, for being a part of these academic activities. Let me tell to all the members that we have a telemedicine helpline. I would like SOGP office to kindly share the poster for everyone to just see. This is a free helpline on which we have trained gynecologists. Daily, you can dial this number. It's a landline number. On this reproductive health helpline, experienced doctors who are well trained how to take a phone call and how to advise the patients is available. So please feel free to share this among your circles, especially the lower socioeconomic group who cannot reach to patients, who cannot have an online session with their doctors. For them, a phone call might be life-saving. So that's it. From my side, thank you very much, SOGP. Allah Hafiz, everyone. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you so
Allah
much.
Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.
It was a pleasure
Thank
being
you
here.
very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Allah Hafiz, Rizwana.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz, Dr. Shahida.
Allah Hafiz.
Shahida,
Ji, Allah Hafiz.
Rehana,
Thank you
Shahida,
very
you
much.
are
thank you
wonderful.
again.
थैंक यू वेरी मच मैडम, आपको देख के मेरा दिल बहुत खुश है और आपको देख के मैं बहुत
मेरा
आपके
भी।
लिए मेरा बहुत अच्छा
आप
गुजरेगा।
सबको देख के
This
मेरा
is
दिल बहुत
my first post-COVID session जो कि मैंने की है. So I am also
This
feeling
is
very,
such a
very
pleasant thing. आज के दिन
Okay.
का मेरे लिए सबसे अच्छा टाइम ये है जब मैं आपका फेस देख रही हूँ. I am so happy to see you
Thank you
and so
so
glad to see you.
Thank you.
Rizwana,
Lots of
that's
love
the
and
thing.
lots of pleasure
Rehana,
for
it was
you.
wonderful to have you here.
Yes, Dr. Rehana made a great efforts with all this
Boy.
dummies and everything. It was a very nice effort. Thank you very much.
Everybody. Okay. Khuda Hafiz.
सर को सलाम दीजिएगा मैडम बहुत सारा.
जरूर,
अच्छा
जरूर, जरूर.
जी,
खुदा
अच्छा
हाफिज.
जी.